Good afternoon. Good afternoon? No, good morning still, everyone. And welcome back. We are about to kick off the roundtable discussion, which is entitled Fueling New Markets, which is the theme of this forum. And we have a very interesting, varied, and capable panel put together that will share their thoughts on this particular issue, on the issues that are facing our industry around the world. Chairing today is Mr. Sanjeev Singh, the chairman of Indian Oil Corporation. He became the chairman on the 1st of June 2017, so congratulations. He's relatively new in the position, but he has been with Indian Oil Corporation for over 35 years, spearheading refinery operations as well as mega greenfield and brownfield projects in refining and petrochemicals. He's a chemical engineer from IIT Roorkee, and he has extensive experience in the refining sector, and has played a key role in setting up, commissioning, and stabilizing two of Indian Oil's biggest greenfield refineries. Mr. Singh, with that, please take over and manage the panel. Thank you. I think you can speak from there if you like.
I'll prefer. Let me start. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank the organizers, WLPGA, for giving me this opportunity to share the panel, share my thoughts with all of you on this very, very important field, very important sector. Before I invite the panelists, let me share a couple of thoughts about LPG market in general, about Indian LPG market in particular. The global LPG production reached to the level of more than 300 million tons during the last year in 2016, registering a growth of more than 5% during the last 5 years. Of the total LPG, nearly 60% is produced from the gas processing plants and nearly 40% comes from the refineries. India might be one of the very few countries which is operating its refineries to maximize LPG production. If you look at the LPG market, it's the whole LPG industry. We can divide into different segments depending upon whether we are using LPG or predominantly for the domestic purpose, as a clean cooking fuel, for the industrial purpose, for the transportation, or for petrochemical. Now, if you look at different countries, they have different priorities for the different sectors. Whether it's a producing country as far as LPG is concerned, or predominantly a consumption center, again the priorities might change. India, as you all know, for us, the bulk of our LPG goes towards the domestic sector, as a cooking fuel. LPG industry continues to grow with new areas of demand as well as with new supplies. LPG provides great opportunity due to competitive price and capability to provide environment-friendly, sustainable solutions, which is becoming more and more important in today's times. US remained the largest LPG producer in the world in 2016. The next biggest increase came from China, where LPG production soared by more than 20% to over nearly 35 million tons, reflecting rises in domestic refining capacity. Coming to LPG demand side, global LPG demand continues to grow, led by Asia and Middle East. In 2016, the total LPG demand growth of 6.5%, which was higher than the LPG supply growth of 5.7%. So we are seeing a growing demand for LPG, little more than the LPG production. The biggest demand center being Asia, where the demand grew by 12% in the year 16, followed by Middle East, where the demand growth was nearly 7%. Coming to the future outlook of LPG, the global demand for LPG is forecast to grow at 2.7% annually during 16 to 21. Use of LPG in chemical consumption is primarily in the production of ethylene and propylene, and which is taking a very, very important role in the future LPG demand. Coming to the Indian LPG scenario, till recently we used to have dual pricing as far as the LPG was concerned. The LPG for the domestic purpose was subsidized by the government, while for other purposes, whether it was for commercial application, transport application, or for petrochemical feedstock, it was non-subsidized. We used to experience a significant amount of diversion from the subsidized LPG to non-subsidized sector, which required different kind of solutions to control. Presently, we have implemented a 100% online bank transfer subsidy scheme, due to which the subsidy is directly transferred to the customers in their bank accounts. And instead of dual pricing, now we have moved to the single pricing of LPG in the market. Now, the solutions look simple unless we look at the number. We are talking about 200 million customers whose bank accounts are today directly linked with the government subsidy or through the oil companies. It's a phenomenal work which was done and which probably laid the foundation of whatever subsequently we could achieve in terms of domestic LPG growth. India consumes the third largest volume of LPG in the world after China and United States. More than 90% goes towards the domestic consumption. The growth attributable to increase in domestic LPG was with average annual domestic enrollment during the last 5 years. The average enrollment in the domestic LPG was more than 15 million per year. Recently, apart from the government scheme through which the government is providing subsidy towards the domestic customers which are below the poverty line, there is one more scheme which has been launched in which, apart from the government monetary schemes, other individuals, other organizations can also contribute towards this scheme. Before I invite my fellow panelists to share their thought, I have a small video of around 5 minutes about the Indian LPG sector and the recent initiatives which have been taken by the Indian industries to increase the domestic LPG consumption. So may I request you to kindly play the video? Thank you.
Just imagine a world without clean fuel. Would it grow or survive? The world is growing and countries are fast evolving with the least risk to nature, because the world has adopted a fuel that is clean and green in nature. That is LPG, or liquefied petroleum gas. LPG is gaining popularity across global markets on account of its clean burning and low carbon emissions. Globally, gas is expected to overtake coal as the second largest fuel source by 2030. And for a big country like India, meeting its energy needs is a humongous challenge. But with a strong governmental support and the active engagement of a world-class LPG distribution system, India today has emerged as the leader in LPG market development. Our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi's vision for a bright energy future for India is based on 4 pillars: energy access, energy efficiency, energy sustainability, and energy security. Serving an expansive customer base of over 200 million, India is the world's second largest consumer of domestic LPG, consuming around 20 million tons every year. Currently, more than 200 LPG bottling plants are operational across the country. Despite its reach, our Honorable Prime Minister felt that if LPG has to benefit the common man, it has to address the hardships of our people. Under the guidance and direction of Honorable Prime Minister, the Oil and Gas Ministry and the LPG sector in particular is on a mission. All households must have clean fuel, and this will be possible with a decisive LPG penetration from the present 72% to 80% by the year 2019. envisioning gas as the bridge to a cleaner and greener India. The last 2 years have seen the Petroleum Ministry embark on an unprecedented expansion of its LPG reach to provide LPG connections to BPL households across the country to replace unclean and unhealthy cooking fuels and to empower the women of the country. And for the first time, millions of people have benefited from the clean and economical LPG fuels through schemes such as the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. Traditionally, more than 10 crore households in this country have relied on polluting fuels like firewood, coal and dung cakes as their primary source of cooking. These are extremely dangerous for the health of the entire family, but these families could scarcely afford to buy LPG. So the Government of India, under the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, planned to provide 50 million LPG connections to below the poverty line families with an outlay of INR 80,000 million. More than 16.5 million LPG connections have already been released to households. This scheme also proposes to generate an additional direct employment to over 100,000 citizens in the country, making this program a landmark initiative by the government, one that has enhanced the quality of life for the people. PEHL, or the Pratyaksh Hastantrit Labh, direct benefit transfer of LPG. PEHL was launched with an objective to ensure that the LPG subsidy reaches the right beneficiaries, thereby eliminating multiple, duplicate or ghost transactions and thus saving huge volumes in subsidy expenditure for the government. For oil marketing companies, PEHL helps to do away with multiple and unauthorized connections. So far, over 170 million consumers have benefited from PEHL, with their subsidies being directly transferred into their bank accounts. As a result, 35 million duplicate, inactive and ghost accounts have been detected and blocked, leading to a saving of more than INR 210,000 million to the exchequer. Give it up, the joy of giving. A brainchild of the Honorable Prime Minister, the Give It Up program has been one of the most successful programs in the executive domains in recent years to meet the needs of truly needy citizens and contribute to the conscientious task of nation building. More than 12 million people responded to the Prime Minister's call to give up their LPG subsidy and buy LPG at the prevailing market rate. The LPG consumer experience has also been reinforced through initiatives like 1906, a 24/7 emergency helpline for gas leakage complaints, Sehaj, a facility for release of online connections having an option of online payment, digital payments for LPG refills on www.mylpg.in with an incentive of INR 5 on online payments, monitoring of grievances on social media and their quick redressal, increasing the number of LPG distributors across the country, audit distributor, a big leap towards transparency by facilitating refill consumption data with other relevant statistics for 200 million customers on a public platform, www.mylpg.in, an integrated solution for all services related to cooking gas, from supply to tracking refills, and round-the-clock SMS IVRS refill booking facility with SMS-based information at each stage. For ultimately, it is the people whose happiness matters. A mother who cooks up some happiness for her kids. Or a boy who gets a healthy childhood for a brighter future. Let us join hands towards transforming the lives of all mankind. Let us celebrate some success stories crafted by the LPG sector in India in leading the country forward. Let us share the story of the Indian LPG sector that has been steadily transforming lives.
Thank you. Now, let's start with our panel discussion. The first panelist who would be sharing his thought would be Mr. Tucker Perkins. He is President and CEO, Propane Education and Research Council, PERC, a non-profit funded and operated by the US propane industry. PERC promotes the safe, efficient use of propane through safety, training, research and development, and consumer education programs. Mr. Perkin joined PERC 5 years ago as Chief Business Development Officer and was promoted to Chief Operating Officer before the council named him President and CEO. Mr. Tucker Perkins, you will have around 10 minutes time to share your thought, and after that we'll have some question answers from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. It's nice to be here. Is my mic working now? There we go. Is it on? Yes. So it's interesting that as we talk about new markets, the first two things I'd like to talk about are not new markets, but frankly very traditional markets for us that we are concerned about declines in market, and we're really applying emphasis. The first is the residential market, which frankly is 70% of the volume in the United States. And we're embarking on a very specific campaign to target water heating, because water heating is really the appliance for us that from an environmental or economic perspective, we can compete against electricity. And we're going to use water heating as a great example to talk about the benefits of propane to the consumer, to the homeowner. And in an effort from that, we hope to expand to the other great appliances in the home, such as cooking, perhaps outdoor living, heating where you have heating. So we're embarking on a very strong marketing campaign. Today, we only are in 7% of new home construction, and we need to do better than that. So we're moving into water heating through marketing. The other market that we're losing, and is a very important market to us, is material handling, specifically forklift. We've worked for the last 3 years on new engines, because for us to retain that market, we had to do better than forklifts were doing at the time. We had to have a better engine that was more fuel efficient, or easier to maintain, and we've done that. We've gotten that market, we've gotten that engine into 8 of the top 10 forklifts now, and so in that material handling, we're not using marketing, we're using technology and innovation to see that we have the next product. If we don't do that in commercial, in the material handling business, we're going to lose that market just because people view electricity as more innovative and more future than a propane forklift. And that's not the case if you look at the user that needs that forklift for multi-shift operations. Now, you're here to talk about new markets, and I think you would expect me to say what I'm going to say, and that is the future for us is clearly in positioning propane engines. And we look specifically to see where propane has an opportunity against diesel, because diesel is viewed by almost everyone in the U.S. as a old fuel, a dirty fuel, a fuel that won't be the fuel of the future. And we see a great position for us to take market share from diesel opportunities. We've done it in one area that you mostly know because we talk about it a lot, and that's school buses. This morning, when our children go to school in the United States, 800,000 children will ride 13,000 school buses to their schools, return back safely tonight. That's in 22 of the 25 largest cities in America and in 47 of the 50 states. Yet we really only have a penetration rate for the whole school bus market of 3 to 4%. We have a great opportunity, but in school buses, we started because it was a cleaner bus. We started because it had much better emissions profile for a child riding on that bus. We've taken this market, though, because it's an economic benefit to the schools, and we spend great time talking to consumers now about why their choice of a clean bus means for them savings, and not only savings in dollars, but it saves money that they then put back in the school. So by choosing propane, they now have a stronger school and a cleaner community. The challenge for us is to continue that penetration in school buses, but to begin to migrate it now to other engine markets like medium-duty trucks, and we're beginning to see that. Very successful moving propane to medium-duty trucks. Behind medium-duty trucks, we also are moving into transit. Not so much the very large buses, but mid-range city buses and a lot of paratransit activity, those that run routes to pick up people to the doctor, perhaps need some kind of special mobility assistance. A big application for us, and we see great success. And other high-range applications like police or shuttle and taxi. We still see great opportunity in those markets because electricity is just not going to work for these multi-shift, 24-hour type vehicles like we see in police fleets. But beyond on-road, we also see a great application for engines positioned against diesel in off-road applications. We have great success with irrigation engines on the farm. We are debuting a tractor in partnership with New Holland. You may have seen it, it's quite prominent in Europe as well. We position it for two fuels, biogas on the natural gas side, or LPG, specifically on propane where biogas isn't available. And we look forward to seeing the agricultural community that embraces propane already realize that propane engines have a great place on the farm, irrigation, and now their tractors. And I think the last piece of that we begin to see is mowing. And I know many of you don't really understand what we do with commercial mowing, but we see tremendous benefit in the emissions profile of a propane mower over a diesel mower. We hear that every day from the people who drive those mowers. They have less respiratory issues, it's a quieter engine, it's a much better experience for them, and their owners consistently see significant savings in operating costs. So we have 150 models today of commercial mowing, and you'll see that continue to grow with great partners like John Deere, Toro, Kohler, some of the names you all know. I think I'll stop there and take questions as when we get to the end. But we really see, we have a very specific strategy, and that is to go after diesel. And we'll do that mainly in the medium duty space and then the off-road space where we have great engines to pit against the diesel products.
Thank you. I think we'll take the questions at the end once all the speakers have shared their initial thoughts. Now I invite Mr. Tawfiq Hamami, General Manager, Afrique Gas. He has over 15 years of experience in the LPG sector, a graduate from HEC Montreal Business School in the field of finance and marketing. Prior to this, Mr. Tawfiq was the director of BMCE Bank from 1986 to 1992, and from 92 to 94, he was the general manager of a real estate construction company. In 1994, he joined the LPG sector as the general manager of Maghreb Gas. Mr. Tawfiq, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to make a brief overview about our company and about the Moroccan market before speaking about the new markets, which is our subject today. So in its 50 years of existence, Africa Gas has become a firm totally integrated into the economic and industrial issues of the Kingdom of Morocco, with an infrastructure that includes 2 import terminals and 5 filling plants, and a cylinder manufacturing unit. Africa Gas has the most complete infrastructure in Morocco that allows her to position itself as the undisputed leader of the gas chain with 50% share market. These infrastructures allow the distribution of 1.2 million tons of LPG through 210 stakeholders and 85,000 points of sales. To do this, Africa Gas relies on a storage of 70,000 metric tons and a fleet of 25 million cylinders. During the current decade, Africa Gas has introduced in Morocco all the international innovations of the sector in collaboration with the best LPG players in the world. Let me now give you some of the key figures about Africa Gas. Africa Gas has the triple certification ISO 2001, 14001, and OSAS 18000. We launched a project called iGas, which enabled the identification of 85,000 points of sales and the implementation of a fully integrated business management platform with its 210 stakeholders and 1,200 deliverers. The Comet cylinder was launched in Casablanca and Rabat at the beginning of this year and we took advantage of this forum to introduce this new generation bottle in the city of Marrakesh via Allogaz service. The implementation of a production unit of a new plastic protector. These new protectors, in addition to offering ergonomics and differentiating design, allowed our newly equipped cylinders to offer greater safety for our customers and the entire supply chain during handling. The launching of LPG fuel for forklift trucks and windmills, which enables Africa Gas to be perfectly positioned for a possible introduction of autogas in Morocco. There is also the launch of LPG network, which enables Africa Gas to control this distribution mode and offer its customers greater comfort in use. The LPG market in Morocco is about 90% a cylinder market. There are therefore great opportunities for development in the case of LPG bulk, either in canalization or in tanks. As a result, Africa Gas is committed to give a hand to its customers by optimizing their energy consumption through its energy efficiency program. Our company has a priority to work on the energy policy launched on the sidelines of COP22. In collaboration with the Moroccan Agency of Energy Efficiency, we have helped major industries reduce their energy consumption with a personalized and transformative approach for companies where energy is an important input. These conversions have resulted in significant savings to our customers. We have also deployed large-scale usage advice for users whose energy consumption is secondary in their operation costs. For these, we have developed guides that encourage the use of new techniques to reduce heat losses, such as heat recovery, the use of condensing boilers, or better insulation. Finally, the feedback we have accumulated allows us to offer to our customers more than LPG. We also offer them the know-how to make the maximized use of this energy. With this expertise, we have already started our expansion in Africa. We are distributing today in Mauritania, and we are in the phase of implanting in Ivory Coast, and we are in prospection in different countries of OCDE. Our know-how is in the construction of storage terminals and filling plants, as well as our expertise in supply and distribution allows us to create a real added value and bring LPG into areas where even today charcoal is one of the main sources of energy for cooking, which causes, as was said before, serious damage in terms of deforestation and health. This strategy is part of the long term, and Africa Gas is committed to this process, which will promote a sustainable development of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your thought. Now, may I invite Dr. Odon de Costa from the Federal. He did his electrical engineering graduation from Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul and has studied petroleum engineering at Petrobras. He has attended the Advanced Management Program at the Harvard Business School and the Advanced Management Program at the INSEAD. He was awarded the honorary PhD in education from University in Bolivia. He has worked at Petrobras and subsidiaries in Brazil, Angola, Libya, Bolivia, and Argentina. Indicated by Petrobras, he was the vice president of Braskem. He was also chairman of the board of directors at Innova SA and Besem Idesa SAPI and director of oil and gas projects at Prumo. He was the president of the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce and the Argentine Chamber of the Oil Industry. Since 2016, Dr. Odon has been the Director General of the ANP. Dr. Odon, please.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you to discuss the developments of the LPG business in Brazil. But I would like to start by congratulating the organizers for putting in place this conference. Also to make a special salute to the Brazilian delegation, one of the largest delegations to this event. And also say that we are very proud to have a Brazilian as a chairman of the World LPG Association. Pedro, congratulations. Well, the Brazilian LPG market is a relevant one of the 10 largest markets in the world. And it's a market that we see divided in two sectors. We have a very dynamic and entrepreneurial distribution sector. We have here several representatives of this industry. And this dynamics of this distribution sector makes possible that the LPG reaches more than 90% of the Brazilian houses and 100% all Brazilian municipalities. As a result of the usage of LPG, we have seen benefits for the Brazilian economy and impacts in the health of the population as well. On the supply side, we have seen in the last decades that we have practically just one supplier, Petrobras, the former national oil company monopoly. And at this right moment, we are in a key moment for the industry in Brazil, because for the first time we are seeing simultaneously Petrobras repositioning their portfolio in the downstream sector and saying that they want to attract the partners and competitors to invest in the supply of LPG. And we see the government with new policies attracting investments for the supply of new fuels. We have a program developed by the government called Fuels Brazil, which is responsible for developing measures to attract investments in logistics, in the supply chain. We need investments in Brazil for producing new volumes of LPG, but also for importing additional LPG into our ports. We need storage, we need port capacities, we need new companies coming in to sharing and competing with Petrobras in this new era of more open, diverse, and competitive supply sector in the LPG business in Brazil. So in summary, we are living a unique window of opportunity for new investments in Brazil. And I leave this message here and invite companies interested in taking this opportunity to go to Brazil and make a bet there. Thank you very much.
Now I invite Mr. Roger, who is the president of UGI International. He graduated from Ryerson University, Toronto, Canada, with a bachelor degree in chemical engineering. Prior to this, he also studied mining engineering at Queen's University for 2 years. After completing his studies, he held various positions with Imperial Chemical Industries before joining Air Liquide in 1994 as the operations manager in Toronto, Canada. He moved to Latin America in 2003 as general manager of Air Liquide Chile, and subsequently moved to Brazil in 2005 as president of Air Liquide Brazil. In 2008, he assumed the position of president Air Liquide Large Industries US in Houston, USA. In 2013, he became the group vice president Large Industries World Business Line in Frankfurt, a position he held until he moved to UGI Corporation. Mr. Roger, please.
Thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you everybody for this opportunity to talk about the LPG business. But before I get into that, I'd like to maybe share a bit the perspective and the background of UGI Corp. So UGI Corporation is a company with approximately 12 billion in sales, and 50% of those sales come from LPG companies, which I'll talk about, and 50% come from two natural gas businesses. One of them, which is a utility company in the northeast of the U.S., and the other, which is a services company, basically in the midstream part of natural gas and LNG production in, well, not production, but LNG. They produce LNG and also distribute natural gas in gathering systems. Now, moving to the LPG piece, we are the general partner of AmeriGas. So AmeriGas has the largest market share in the U.S. with approximately 15% market share, sell just over 2 million tons of product. And UGI then started investing in international. So you see on your lanyard the UGI International logo. In the international space, we're essentially in 16 countries across Europe and grew through acquisitions throughout the last 15 years or so. The two LPG businesses represent about 50% of the result for the company. So when I'm going to talk about LPG and some of the challenges and more specifically some opportunities, I'm coming from this perspective of being a distributor where we're essentially delivering the last mile to customers. And we have a real challenge ahead of us. The challenge is, and Tucker talked about it, where we see a structural decline in demand in all of the mature markets. We do have some positions in some emerging markets in Eastern Europe, but for the most part, we are playing in the mature market space. And for the last many years, we have seen a 2 to 3% decline in consumption, driven by efficiency programs, so people are just using less LPG, and driven by changes to other renewable options. So when we're thinking about going forward, and as I mentioned, this has been happening for several years, so despite all of the great programs, and Tucker talked about investments in new engines, investments in other alternatives or other applications for LPG, we're just not seeing the benefit of that effort yet. So one of the things I'd like to bring to the roundtable is how can we accelerate? How can we accelerate creating, first of all, new applications so that we don't see the structural decline? Because the way we've grown as a company is through acquisition. So we continue to acquire to grow, but there's a limit to that kind of acquisition or that kind of growth strategy. And then, of course, we seek efficiency. So we're always looking to get better at what we do so that we can grow profitability. But that being said, I think there's more focus needed on new applications and promoting new applications. And the other piece that I'd like to bring to the roundtable is how can we accelerate a better understanding of LPG? I'm relatively new to the LPG industry. I've only been in this industry for a couple of years. There is no doubt in my mind that it is quite misunderstood in the outside world. People do not really comprehend the efficiency of the product, the cleanliness of the product, the portability of the product, and how it is absolutely a bridge to continue to drive a cleaner planet as we are moving from other fossil fuels to potentially natural gas. Thank you.
The panel would not have been complete without having a lady on the panel. So let me invite Mrs. Olapose Williams. She is the Chief Executive Officer of OVH Energy Marketing Limited, Nigeria, a foremost Nigerian petroleum products marketing company and the market leader among the major petroleum product marketeers in the LPG subsector in Nigeria. She has over 20 years of experience in the downstream oil and gas industry. She obtained her bachelor's degree in microbiology from the University of Lagos and a diploma in information systems from Westminster University, London. She joined Unipetrol in 2001, and over the last 16 years, she has had a number of key management positions in the company, including customer service manager, head of commercial and retails, chief operating officer, as well as chief sales and marketing officer. She is passionate about development in Nigeria and Africa, and is a strong advocate of girl-child education, poverty alleviation, gender equality, and women empowerment. Mrs. Williams, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak about a topic that is very dear to me, especially coming from Nigeria. OVH Energy, formerly used to be Owando. We're a downstream retail company out of Nigeria. We deal in different petroleum products, gasoline, gas oil, bitumen, and of course, LPG. Nigeria is a population of 180 million people. Out of Nigeria, the consumption of LPG is just about, say, 1.9 kg per capita. This was in 2015. We're moving to 2.4 now. Second largest producing in Africa, we have LNG, has a capacity to produce 1.5 million liters, and still usage is barely about 200,000 metric tons on a yearly basis. And you wonder why. Loads of opportunities in Nigeria. The challenges range from awareness, infrastructure, distribution. So it's a whole load of problems which the private sector cannot fix on their own. So you've had a lot of participation from the private sector, like my company, whereby we go about and create awareness to the bottom of the pyramid, encourage them to use LPG, because kerosene and firewood is readily available. So all you need to do is go into the woods, cut down the firewood, and you start cooking. Nobody's going to speak to you about deforestation. Also kerosene, what you need is just a plastic bottle. You don't need a canister for anything. Just pick a plastic bottle, go to the distributor and get your kerosene filled up, and you start cooking. So we know all what that does. The challenge we have is the switching of the population from all those fuels to LPG. The challenge is there because they can't afford that switch. So you have the cylinder bottles that will cost you, what? Probably a percentage of the plastic bottles that you'll get from the streets. So you can't afford the cylinder bottles, and then the only alternative you have is to use the fuels that is readily available. But I'm proud to say that the government has introduced a lot of task force now. They have created solutions whereby they encourage people to use LPG. They're speaking to the rural areas. They're speaking to women. My company, for example, we set up something that we called O-gas, and it's a kind of canister, the small canister, which is about 3 kg, and it's easy for them to access it. And what we do is we distribute it freely. We get the NGOs to also support, whereby they make it accessible to the rural areas. And then we also get the involvement of microfinance banks to support the financing of the cylinders to the rural areas, whereby it takes them forever. It takes them a long while for them to, about 6 months to a year, in terms of financing the cost of their cylinders. There's a lot of opportunities as well when we talk about the terminals and the storage terminals. Storage in Nigeria is just about 40,000 tons to support the entire population of 180 million people. And then you have the terminals as well that can receive this product. So you have a storage challenge. You have also infrastructure challenge in terms of distribution, because you have to move the bottles from one area, which is where you find the cities, into the rural areas. And all of that is not readily available. But there's a lot of opportunities, just like my colleague from Brazil, welcoming a lot of investors into the country, especially now that the government has taken it on board and driving the switch with the participation of the private companies in Nigeria. Thank you.
We heard the initial thoughts from panelists. It's very obvious that the different geographies, they have different opportunities, and the same LPG business we view slightly differently. LPG or propane in transportation had been a very, very successful model in different countries. And we heard, Peter, that it's very prominent in US, while probably in other countries it is still picking up. Now, one thing which is very commonly read and talked about today is the invasion of EVs. With electricity being available cheap, with EVs, they may not be commercially cheaper than the other forms of vehicle today, but with time, once they become cheaper, then probably they will provide a very stiff competition, especially if the electricity is used in a renewable way. And we have the solution to the storage of power. So how do you look at this challenge for coming years? And do you find, I mean, because when we talk about propane, when we talk about LPG-driven engines, there are definitely positive advantages of this kind of engines also. So how do you look at it, and how do you counter that opportunity for future? Mr. Tucker, yes, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, okay. I was gonna say, I might have strong opinions on all of that. So I think certainly we have seen the forewarning of that with electric forklifts, in that markets that we should traditionally dominate, we have lost, in our case, 10 points of market share to electric, only because people, whether that's a health and safety officer or just a fleet person, thinks that electric is better. And so we have to begin to explain to people that propane is the lightest carbon fuel that works. Propane has tremendous benefits over electricity in the applications that we should dominate. So in our markets, I don't expect to see, we don't have passenger cars today, and I really don't think we'll have passenger cars as a feature going forward. But in those markets where payload and range are a factor, and electricity is not competitive today, we're going to continue to penetrate those markets. School buses. The range isn't appropriate for a school bus to go EV, and if it did, it costs 3 times what our vehicles cost today. It's just not cost effective. We'll continue to penetrate in those markets. Moving forward, though, I think one of the things we're talking about, electric water heaters. Why would I talk about water heaters when you ask me about vehicles? We have to begin to make the connection with the consumer, whether that's an individual or a business owner, that propane is in fact a solution to the environment. And that propane, for greenhouse gases, for reduced oxides of nitrogen, for reduced particulate matter, it can be a better solution than electricity in many applications. And that's why we're going to take that argument right to the people and try to sway it. If we don't, the millennials' children, they won't even consider LPG for their applications 20 years from now. So the answer to your question is, we have competitive advantages in fleets today and 10 years from today where we have payload and range issues, school buses, transit buses, heavy-duty trucks, and we're going to focus on that. When we win that market, we're going to continue to show people how propane can beat electricity here and propane can beat electricity in other markets. You hear it from Toyota. The chairman of Toyota, the chairman of so many companies say, we're going to make emission-free vehicles. I don't know what that is. An electric car is not an emission-free vehicle once you recharge it. And we have to begin to dispel that myth immediately.
Now, the domestic sector is definitely a very, very important sector as far as LPG market potential is concerned. For the sectors, I mean, there are a couple of countries which have demonstrated very successful penetration in the domestic market. Morocco, Brazil, I mean, these are, even India, I mean, these are all the success stories as far as the domestic market penetration is concerned. To start with, while there are a couple of many more countries which are still facing the challenge of increasing the penetration of LPG in the domestic market. When I say domestic, it is predominantly for the cooking fuel market. And so many times the government has to provide subsidies, or they have to go for the dual pricing for subsidizing the clean cooking fuel. How do you deal with how you have dealt with the diversion issue, so that the subsidized LPG doesn't go to the other sectors which normally are not subsidized by the government. So in this regard, may I ask Mr. Hamomi to share your views on this?
If you allow, I'm going to answer in French to be more precise in my answer. Donc effectivement, le cas du Maroc est un exemple pour nos amis africains, notamment pour le Nigeria. Aujourd'hui, au Maroc, on est sur un taux de pénétration de LPG dans le domestique qui dépasse les 90%. Ça n'a pas été facile pour le gouvernement. Il faut reconnaître qu'il y a eu des budgets de subventions qui étaient très, très lourds. On a frôlé les 20 milliards de dirhams au moment où les prix du LPG étaient à leur pic. Ça a donné des résultats. Bon, le résultat, c'est le taux de pénétration dont je viens de parler, qui est d'environ 90%. Aujourd'hui, comme la subvention profite à tous les consommateurs, donc il n'y avait pas, jusqu'à il y a un horizon de 10 ans, il n'y avait pas de risque de diversion, donc de mauvaise utilisation de la subvention. On a constaté récemment, depuis une dizaine d'années, une nouvelle utilisation de LPG, notamment dans le domaine agricole, dans l'aviculture, et ça représente aujourd'hui quelque chose comme 200 000 tonnes, c'est à peu près 10% du marché marocain. Maintenant, sur le court terme, il n'y a pas de solution parce que la différence de prix entre le LPG subventionné et le gasoil est tellement importante qu'avant de trouver une solution à l'utilisation dans le domaine de l'agriculture, il faut venir avec des solutions pour les agriculteurs. Donc voilà, la situation elle est telle qu'elle. Hein. Donc il y a comme vous avez dit, une success story pour la pénétration dans le domestique, mais ça avait un coût quand même assez important. Donc aujourd'hui, on est en train de réfléchir au Maroc une limitation plutôt de la subvention, en la spécifiant plutôt aux niches les plus nécessiteuses. Donc le gouvernement travaille dans le cadre d'une réflexion. On n'a pas encore officiellement l'horizon du démantèlement de la subvention, mais je pense que la subvention a représenté une très grande aide au succès de cette subvention. Maintenant, je partage ce qu'a dit mon ami concernant le développement du LPG pour les nouvelles niches. Effectivement, nous, on a testé une expérience depuis 5 ans et le volet communication est très important. Donc, on a approché pas mal d'industriels qui ont fonctionné depuis plus de 20-30 ans avec du fuel ou du gasoil. Et on a constaté chez ces gens-là qu'un manque d'information était à la source de la non-utilisation du LPG. Donc je pense qu'il faut avoir des politiques de communication assez poussées, il faut aller vers ces gens-là et il faut aller aussi avec des études de cas concrets. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut leur montrer de manière spécifique un petit peu le gain dont ils vont bénéficier en utilisant le LPG, en plus des autres effets bénéfiques de l'utilisation du LPG. Merci.
Thank you. May I ask Dr. Odon to kindly share his views on the same thing? How do you tackle the dual pricing or the diversion of subsidized LPG to non-subsidized sectors in case the government is providing subsidy for the clean cooking fuel?
Well, for the past years, Petrobras, as the main supplier of LPG in Brazil, they practice different pricing for cooking and heating purpose and other industrial purpose. Recently, they changed their pricing policy. They are adopting more market-related policies. We still will see a big difference between the pricing applied to heating and cooking, but we also see a smaller difference between the industrial and the cooking and heating pricing. What we forecast for the future is that we will have an open market. We are working to eliminate the restrictions that we have in Brazil for other usages. Since we had the restrictions in the supply side, we had restrictions for utilization of LPG and other industrial uses in Brazil. But we are working with the government to eliminate this restriction in the very short time. And we believe that we will have, in the years to come, a much more dynamic, open, and competitive LPG market in which LPG can compete with other fuels in a very clear and open way. So we expect that the participation of the LPG in the Brazilian energy matrix in the years to come is going to increase when we lift all these restrictions. We want to have simultaneously investments in the storage and in the ports, so we can have LPG being used in other areas without bringing any supply restrictions. So our plan is to eliminate the restrictions we have for LPG usage, but simultaneously attract investors to build new infrastructure to guarantee that we won't face any supply restriction.
Mr. Williams, it's not only Nigeria, probably all the countries within Africa, I mean, they have tremendous potential as far as the cooking fuel is concerned. LPG use as cooking fuel. Whether the Nigerian government is providing subsidy towards this, and if yes, then what are the challenges which exactly you are foreseeing, and how you are tackling those challenges?
Unfortunately, in Nigeria, it's the other way around. The Nigerian government hasn't provided any subsidy with regards to LPG. The reverse, it's provided subsidy with regards to kerosene. That has stopped now. It had its own challenges with regards to subsidy to kerosene. So I think that there'll be a lot of reluctance in terms of them providing the subsidy, but there are other areas. For example, we don't have, Nigeria does not have a cylinder manufacturing company based in the country that you can encourage people by giving tax waivers to set up, cylinder manufacturing companies within Nigeria. That would also help in terms of bringing the cost down. Also taxation in terms of waivers for supply. We don't even have any supply challenges. I believe that the LNG based in Nigeria has the capacity to supply the domestic market to optimization, is also a largest exporter. So I think that in terms of waivers, in terms of supporting all the initiatives the private sector has done, I've heard the success story from Morocco, I've heard success story from India and Indonesia as well. And what is very common to both success stories is the involvement of the government supporting the creating that penetration. So I think there are a lot of there are waivers that the government. It doesn't necessarily have to be in terms of subsidy, especially when you have enough capacity in terms of production. But they can give the waivers as well as probably give cylinders free, those type of initiatives.
Roger, your company is involved in a lot of LPG business in US and Europe. What new opportunities do you see today?
So there are some opportunities that we talked a little bit about. So we do see the school bus initiative, for example, where autogas is being expanded in that segment. Leisure markets continue to grow. So as much as I talked about a structural decline in demand, we do see some areas, some specific little niches that continue to grow, like the leisure market and autogas in Poland, for example. And where we see wealth distribution being increased, for example, in Eastern Europe, those are markets that where we're seeing some growth as well. I think the challenge for us is to, when we look at the overall market, even with those growth incentives or those growth niche markets, I should say, we're still seeing a fundamental challenge in the industry in the mature markets. So when we talk about distributed electricity, I think LPG can play a very big role in helping many issues. And for example, I'd like to just talk a little bit about distributed power. It is progressively more and more difficult to build pipeline systems across the US and in many of the mature markets. We know the inefficiency of transporting electricity over very long distances. So when we think of distributed power and the role that LPG can play in supplying a small cogen unit in a specific market, there's a space there. There's a space for the LPG industry to continue to grow. And then back to a comment I made earlier, when we're thinking about educating, because part of this is all educating the market and educating policymakers and educating consumers. We talk about, not LNG, and we talk about the benefits of LNG at the consumer level. They see LNG as a very clean fuel. Or we are starting to see things like hydrogen fuel cells. But when you really break down the carbon footprint of an LNG facility and if natural gas is being liquefied in an energy intensive area where coal is still part of that energy production, well, there's an argument to be made that LNG is not necessarily as clean as an alternative to LPG. When you're thinking of hydrogen fuel cells, which are potentially going to make a play to replace electric motors, certainly the industrial gas companies think that's a way to go. Well, hydrogen is produced from cracking methane and steam. Well, the CO2 footprint of a steam methane reformer is quite large. So I think there's just a tremendous amount of misunderstanding in the market, and where LPG can play a significant piece to help us grow some of these niche markets that today, there's activity. There's just, in my opinion, not enough.
Just clarify one more thing. I mean, with the renewable power becoming cheaper and cheaper day by day, it's becoming easily available throughout many countries. I mean, the countries where the 24/7 cheap power was not available today, it might be available. It may not be today, maybe in the coming very near future. How do you see as a threat to the conventional fuel business, I mean, of which LPG is a very major part? I mean, just let me elaborate that. Like the clean cooking fuel, LPG is one of the major fuel when we are talking about the clean cooking fuel. Once the decentralized or centralized electricity is available, which is reliable and generated through the renewable source, it might be wind, it might be solar, then how do you see the LPG business growing? Or don't you see it as a threat to the existing business?
For myself? Again, I think the LPG space is a bridge to other technologies. So if we're talking about, and I hope I understood the question correctly, please correct me if I didn't, but when we're talking about the fact that the world is going to continue to improve and continue to find renewable sources, LPG has a role to play today. And I think we still see a lot of oil conversion opportunities. So when I talk about growth, we still see parts, even in some of the mature markets, where oil is still extensively used. And where there is an opportunity for LPG to continue to be that bridge between going from classical fossil fuels to further renewables. And the timing of this is arguably decades. We're not talking just a few years, I think we're talking decades.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask anything from the panelists, kindly raise your hand and the mic should reach you. Kindly introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Yeah, John Hauge, Global LPG Partnership. A question for Mr. Hamumi with regard to focusing the subsidy toward the most needy. Mr. Singh has reminded us in India of two particular approaches. One is to focus on eliminating the duplicate and the ghost users as of subsidy. And the second is a Give It Up campaign that has been quite successful. Do you think either or both of those would work in this country?
Excuse me, I'm going to answer in French. Au niveau du Maroc, comme je l'ai expliqué, il n'y a pas de stratégie de subvention. Donc, la subvention est unique, elle concerne tous les consommateurs marocains. Donc, au début, quand on a lancé la politique de subvention, on n'a pas différencié entre les différents secteurs d'activité. Donc, il y avait un souci dans un stade initial qui était de limiter la déforestation. Donc on a accompagné l'augmentation de la consommation de LPG en l'accompagnant par la subvention. Aujourd'hui, comme j'ai dit, il y a une fuite vers il y a deux fuites. Première fuite, vers les secteurs qui ne devraient pas bénéficier de cette subvention. On a parlé du secteur agricole, du secteur avicole, mais on n'a pas pour l'instant trouvé de solution pour les cibler. Et la deuxième problématique, c'est le conseil que je donne à nos amis africains qui veulent passer d'un niveau primaire à un niveau très élevé au niveau de la consommation du LPG, c'est s'ils lancent une campagne ou une politique de subvention pour faire augmenter les consommations de LPG, c'est bien faire le travail dès le début. Ne pas lancer une politique de subvention comme ce qui a été fait au Maroc qui touchait tout le monde, parce qu'on a une bonne catégorie de la population qui ne devrait pas bénéficier de subventions pour la simple raison qu'elle n'est pas dans le besoin. Donc je pense qu'il faudrait bien faire le travail depuis le début. La subvention est intéressante dans un premier temps pour les raisons dont on a parlé, de santé, de déforestation, et pour faire augmenter un petit peu les consommations de GPL. Donc pour nous, je pense que j'en ai parlé tout à l'heure, donc il y a des solutions pour l'avenir. Elles sont sur la table des responsables gouvernementaux. On a les solutions on veut. Maintenant, on attend le bon timing pour les appliquer. Donc, il y a une catégorie de la population marocaine qui est dans le besoin de bénéficier de cette subvention. Mais je dirais que c'est un chiffre approximatif. Peut-être 70% des gens qui utilisent aujourd'hui le LPG n'ont pas besoin de bénéficier de cette subvention. Je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu exactement à votre question. Merci.
Hi, it's Andrew Bills, Origin Energy in Australia. Tucker, I've got a question. You're probably not going to be surprised I'm going to ask it, but just feeding up what Roger was talking about with LPG being a transition fuel through to a cleaner energy world. You said you were targeting hot water, and I'm just curious about how you're targeting hot water given where solar is in that space. Are you seeing it complementary or a competitive fuel? And if so, what are the attributes that you are sort of expelling to target hot water as a growth opportunity?
So I always have to think about short term and long term. So certainly short term, the thing about solar, we talk about it, yes, the sun is free, but the cost to capture the sun is far from free. So there is an extreme expense to have solar hot water, and most homeowners across the world really aren't prepared to pay for that expense up front, significant upfront expense. So short term, we have a great opportunity to position propane against electricity, and it doesn't matter what your metric is. If your metric is cost, we think we can demonstrate a better cost. If your metric is the environment, we know we can we can show that that propane water heater is superior to the electric water heater. That emission-free water heater, when you think about power generated at 35% efficient, power line loss at another 6 or 7%, and here we have a 98% efficient unit in your home making hot water. That's a very complex argument to make to a homeowner, but we're beginning to do it. Now, long term, clearly we see the term zero net energy. That term should make all of us tremble a bit, in that most of our policymakers expect the home of the future will produce as much energy as it consumes. In that environment, I can see a world where propane may produce some power. Perhaps they have combined heat and power in their home, and they'll have to have these very innovative propane-fueled appliances in that home in order to meet that. In that environment, yes, solar will be a part of it. But that environment is so far forward that it's not unlike the hydrogen environment. If you begin to talk about the hydrogen environment as a policymaker, it's a wonderful thing. The minute you begin to bring in real-world economics and who pays for those costs, all of a sudden, it's not quite so magical. So short term, we have a great argument against an electric water heater, and long term, we'll have to feature solar or perhaps wind-driven applications in the home of the future. I don't think propane goes away from that home, though.
Another question, sorry. While I've got the microphone. Roger, just you talked about how can we accelerate the applications to help grow the market. And I'm just curious, do you see that industry-led? Do you see that companies aren't doing enough to do that? Is that a combination of working with associations like PERC or equivalents elsewhere? I'm just curious as to where you see the effort.
I think it's clearly a combination of the above. That being said, there's tremendous respect that different economies are in different places when it comes to the application of LPG, where we're hearing about the challenges of converting from kerosene to LPG. So I think it's a combination where the companies that are playing in the more mature markets have a leadership role to play and must and should be investing more resources towards finding these new applications, which will fundamentally benefit the LPG industry globally, whether it is in a developing market or whether it is in a mature market. So I think the combination of us as an association, PERC, of course, and companies themselves putting more effort in the R&D space to help promote these new technologies will just benefit the industry as a whole.
My name is Suyash Gupta. In fact, he asked the question, a large part of that question. It's to Roger and to Tucker Yu. UGI has been active in various European markets as well as in the US market. So in terms of where do you look at opportunities of synergies wherein global industry can synergize together for new applications? Because one size does not fit all. And as you said, every economy, every market is different. But if you were to pick 3 applications or 3 usages, non-domestic, because domestic is very specific, it's very regional, and it's completely different for each market. But if you were to choose 3 areas of cooperation for the global LPG industry, which maybe could include marine, for bunker fuels, or so what those applications would be. And again, Tucker, PERC has been very active in the North American markets and also now possibly looking at regional markets. So I would love to have comments from both. Yeah.
You start. Suyash, will you ask that question? Will you just ask the one? I couldn't quite hear you. There's enough echo. 3 markets that do what?
3 areas of synergizing and cooperating for the global LPG industry. Okay. For getting those tons in, because we are talking about new applications and we have a global glut of 25-30 million tons. So where do we use that product? Does it go into PDH? Does it go into feedstock? So where can we really find those new applications to get that LPG, in usage, better usage of that application rather than going into feedstock? So
I'd like to attack the question to say that it's not only new applications that result in a new requirement for LPG. When we think of synergies, of course, there could be new applications that we should be working more holistically. And I talked a little bit about distributed electricity. That's certainly an area that many mature markets will have the challenge going forward of having power generated possibly in a more distributed fashion, which will also benefit economies globally. That's not just a mature market challenge in my humble opinion. But when I think of synergies, I also think about the way we distribute product. So look, everything from logistics to supply to IT solutions. So if I were to pick three, I would certainly pick IT as an area where we as an industry can continue to invest, not only to improve the customer experience, but also improve the operational efficiency of moving propane around and distributing propane in various packages. I would certainly see initiatives in the area, as I mentioned, distributed power as one, or engines. We talked a little bit about engines. Fuel cells are also a wave that we're going to be dealing with. LPG has a space to play. So engines, generation, and efficiencies in operations are kind of the three areas that I would focus in on. And I think IT is a big piece of that synergy piece in the operational space.
I'm going to just say I agree with you and stop at that, 'cause I think that's right. Anyone else?
My name is Shashi from Total. Just wondering how much of a threat or a competition can LNG and CNG be for LPG markets in the coming days?
Can you ask that one more time? Or could you? Yeah, it's okay.
How
Hello.
competitive can
The question is, how much of threat LNG and CNG, like CNG as a cooking fuel and LNG as a transport fuel? Now we are more and more being talked about that LNG is preferred as a transport fuel to diesel. Now you are talking about the propane being used for school buses, etc. So just wondering, with the infrastructure in LNG and CNG being increasingly available, how much of a threat LNG and CNG can offer to LPG markets?
Your question is predominantly towards the transportation sector.
As well as for cooking fuel. Now with the infrastructure being more and more available, if I can get an online gas at home, I would rather prefer this than a gas cylinder. So going forward in the world markets, how will this turn out to be?
Okay. I do. So I never know whether to answer a question as an engineer, as a policy person, or as a practical propane person. Because as an engineer, I always will quickly tell you there are so many benefits of LPG over LNG, but let's be real about that. In the transportation sector, where there is dense population, a strong natural gas infrastructure, it's reasonable to think that CNG, LNG will be successful. And we don't have those big heavy-duty engines today that generally need to power inner-city transit buses, garbage trucks. And if we did, there's a tremendous political will around that, with a lot of support from the natural gas industry, to take that market. Now, the minute we move beyond that, though, it's the LPG fuel that comes in. And so as we think about developing countries, as we think about countries that don't have a tremendous electric infrastructure, as Roger talked about, for the cooling required for LNG. Now, if you think as a scientist and as an engineer and as a friend of the people who have to pay for these things, it should be LPG, because LPG doesn't require any of those other intense coolings, tremendous electric load. And don't forget, LNG has more power. The reason we have LNG is because CNG doesn't have enough power to really do something for a long time. In America, we see a lot of trucks went to LNG. A lot of cross-country trucks tried LNG. I think the jury now says that that's probably a failed experiment. You will not see an LNG national network. It's just too complex. You won't see a national CNG network because there's not enough energy in that fuel. What's left? Propane. So I still see it, mass cities, tremendous density, we'll see CNG, LNG. Short runs, CNG, longer runs, LNG. But that leaves propane, and I think propane should be and will be the bridge fuel once we beat diesel and until electric really comes, and I will be very dead when electric is that good.
Thank you.
I'm Paul Ladner with UGI, and my question is really oriented towards Mr. Singh, Chairman. We operate business in primarily developed economies, LPG companies in developed economies, and we struggle in some of these countries where there are existing government subsidies that just won't seem to go away. Speaking specifically of Belgium or of Hungary, for example, and generally done through pricing controls. In India, when the government is subsidizing LPG, or in other countries, Indonesia, for example, are there plans to wean off those subsidies at some point? So do you think about not just the immediate impact of increasing LPG usage in the country, but the long term and eventually weaning the population off of the subsidies?
Let me explain slightly the pricing mechanism which is prevailing in India. Although the LPG is subsidized, but the price is also floating with the international market. The price of a cylinder varies depending upon the international market, because nearly 50% of LPG in the country is imported today. So the price of the cylinder varies month to month, while the government provides a floating or the flexible subsidy to individual customer. So the customer, what he pays per month or per cylinder is fixed. The government has decided to withdraw this subsidy in a very, very gradual manner. It is 4 Indian rupees per month, which amounts to nearly 2 cents per month. So at that rate, the subsidy is getting reduced. And we plan, ultimately we plan that we should be able to withdraw it completely. Today, the government has also included that the people who can afford, or the people or the population which does not require subsidy, are not being given subsidy. Now, all this is possible, or implementation of any policy is possible today, because the subsidy is directly going to individuals' bank account. So and there is a cap on number of subsidized cylinders which he can use in a year. There is a cap of 12 cylinders per year. So anybody who is consuming more than that, definitely it is going beyond his own personal consumption. So that 13 cylinder doesn't get subsidy. So it's a different way. But the backbone of the whole scheme is that the total database of nearly more than 200 million people, customers, is digitized today. And it is all linked with individuals' bank accounts. So now, once this is done, then probably any form of policy can be implemented very, very efficiently. Any more question? So, because we still have some time left, so we probably did not talk about a very important application of LPG, which is for petrochemical feedstock. Although the priority again varies from country to country, and it's predominantly driven by the market economics. Now there is a school of thought that if this application of LPG is promoted today, I'm using the word today because tomorrow it might be unavoidable if other sectors are shrinking. But if it is promoted today, then probably it may have an impact on the LPG price, which may again impact on the desired application of LPG in the desired sectors. So I would like all panelists to just very briefly give their opinion on this issue. How do you look at it? The application of LPG as a feedstock for petrochemical. Whether individual countries or individual companies should very aggressively go for this,
or till the other sectors are shrinking, we should wait?
I'll start. I know where Tucker sits on this, and I'm sure he'll express it. But there's no doubt in the petrochemical space, it's a commodity feedstock. The petrochemical space are not looking at LPG the way we as an industry look at LPG. As much as they're going to be opportunistic, it will be naphtha one day when it makes sense. It'll be LPG the next day when it makes sense economically. So I think there's a few concerns. There's the concern, of course, about the tremendous load and the pricing volatility that it'll bring to the LPG space. We won't stop them, but that being said, I don't believe that it's something that as an industry we should encourage. We need to understand it. We need to understand what makes their economics work, and subsequently, what is the impact on our industry. They're very different applications, and again, I think the petchem space will be extremely just opportunistic.
I agree with that. I think it's opportunistic and not a very relevant volume for increasing in the future.
So before I start, I might invite y'all to go get your lunch and come back, and we'll do this over lunch, because I could go on for an hour. But I think this panel typifies every reason why you would not want to do that, because we represent uses of the fuel from as simple as changing a woman's life, saving the health of 3 million people, all the way to powering very sophisticated engines. But the one thing that binds us together is we are advocating for this fuel for innovative and creative uses and ways to use that fuel to change the lives of people economically and environmentally. The people you mentioned, the petrochemicals, they view our fuel as nothing more than a tool to create their product. We care about increasing supply, level price, fuel specifications. They care about nothing of that. We have nothing in interest. We have nothing in interest with them, and their interests are in fact far separate from ours. The fuel we advocate for and the fuel that we all make our livings from is not the fuel they use, and they have no purpose here at all.
Always in French?
Yeah, sure.
Donc, je pense que vous avez parlé du secteur de la pétrochimie. En tout cas, pour le cas du Maroc, il n'y a pas beaucoup de pétrochimie. Mais c'est le même réflexe chez tous les industriels, ce que nous appelons, nous, le marché du vrac. Hein. C'est le bulk. Donc, c'est la même manière d'aborder l'utilisation du LPG ou non. Donc, c'est toujours une question de prix. Est-ce que le prix du LPG comparé aux autres sources d'énergie est plus intéressant, donc on y va, on utilise ou pas. Maintenant, à mon avis, il faudrait plutôt avoir le souci d'une utilisation du LPG, comme ce que vous venez de dire, à vocation plus sociale et écologique, et essayer de viser des marchés qui vont être stables et réguliers dans l'avenir. Parce que sinon, on va avoir des difficultés à gérer notre partie supply. Parce que si on prend l'exemple de l'industrie, un mois le prix du LPG va être intéressant, donc ils vont basculer vers une utilisation massive du LPG. Dès que le mois d'après, il y a une autre source d'énergie qui est plus intéressante, donc ils reviennent à cette autre source d'énergie. Et nous, en tant qu'opérateurs, on va avoir les plus grandes difficultés à gérer nos approvisionnements, notre gestion du stock, ainsi de suite. Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
I guess from our side, as an emerging market, the last person you want to see in that space will be the petrochemicals, especially with regards to cost. So, I mean, I want to share your view as well. It's not what you want to see for emerging markets. That's not in that space.
Thank you very much. I think let's join hands to thank the panelists for sharing their thoughts with us. It had been a wonderful discussion, especially from different perspectives with respect to the LPG business. For future, one thing is very, very sure that LPG is going to stay there for many, many decades. But we should also keep it in our mind that for a successful LPG-driven business, all the stakeholders have to join hands. Probably it's a single stakeholder in this particular line cannot get the desired results. Thank you very much.